Today I'm out in Montana because I've had the opportunity to finally drive the 2024 GMC Canyon AT4X AEV edition. Long way of saying this is the most capable mid-size truck available in America right now, at least until we see a new TRD Pro. We'll see how that head-to-head match goes. The first thing you'll notice up front is obviously the look of this AEV edition. We get a different bumper up front, and we'll take a look at the first edition, and we'll also take a look at the regular AT4X so you can see what's going on. This entire lower bumper has been replaced with a big steel unit. Then we have a little plastic trim piece up there to help integrate it with the look of the front end. The grille, basically the same sort of style that we've seen before. We then get an additional lift because we have 35-inch tires from the factory. That gives us an additional 1.5 inches of lift versus the regular AT4X. Obviously rocker rails right there. You'll really notice the difference back here. You can actually really dramatically see those DSSV shocks back there. Those really help reduce shock overheating if you're really spending a lot of time out on the trail. We then get the full-size 35-inch tire right back there in the bed. I think that position is a little awkward because it really blocks the view out of the back. I kind of wish it had been rotated 90 degrees and it was just on one side. We then have the AEV bumper back here with obviously really heavy-duty recovery hook locations. And you can see the difference really between that and the regular AT4X over here. This regular AT4X has a plastic painted cover on its bumper, so definitely a very different look up front. We still have the cutouts here for improved approach angles right there on the tires. So that still happens on the regular AT4X. You'll notice the lift, not quite as aggressive. Tires, just a little bit smaller. And again, a little bit different versus the first edition, which is actually over here in red. You can see that GMC went in a different direction for the AEV edition. This has the big push bumper up front, but the actual bumper modification slotted right there in that midsection that we find in the regular AT4X bumper. But it did have a winch from the factory. If you're interested in a winch, AEV has your back. That's why they've strategically located this front license plate cover exactly where it is, because it covers the big hole where you could put a winch aftermarket. The bumper is prepped right from the factory, but for some reason GMC is not actually giving us a factory winch. Now under the hood, we find the same 2.7 liter turbo that we find in the regular Canyon. 310 horsepower, well over 400 pound-feet of torque. So it's a pretty torquey engine. And that's why in this generation, GMC decided not to give us an updated diesel. They say this actually gives us excellent fuel economy and more torque than we had out of that diesel at more usable RPMs. Sending all that turbocharged torque to the ground is a standard 8-speed automatic transmission. I sort of wish they had attempted to pair this engine with GM's excellent 10-speed. I would love to see what that would be like. We get a rear locker, as you'd assume, but we also get a front locker, putting this in a relatively limited set of trucks, period, big, small, medium-sized, etc., that have a front locker and a rear locker. Of course, you could get a Gladiator Rubicon. That would logically be a very direct competitor to this. We haven't driven the new TRD Pro from Toyota. There's going to be a next generation Tacoma. I'm going to be driving that in November, so be sure and stay tuned. Obviously, it's going to be the other direct competitor to the Canyon. On the inside, we get some AEV additions like the embroidered logo right there on the headrests, but also the same touches that you'd find in the AT4X version. And that's one thing that I like about GM's AT4X lineup is that this is not just off-roady, it also brings some of the more premium interior touches. You'll really notice that in the Sierra 1500 AT4X. So you have that badging right there, embroidered on the seat back, red stripes, and the tri-colored theme continues throughout this interior. So if I go ahead and move over here to the doors, you'll see that we have the red touches right there on the air vents, red stitching on that leatherette section in the middle of the dash, sort of a carbon fiber-esque trim touch right there, and then hard plastics up at the top of the dash. Remember, this is still a relatively inexpensive truck. You know, everything's relative. This is gonna be about $70,000, but compared to the bigger AT4Xs, this is gonna be less expensive. In the middle of everything, we have that Bose center channel speaker, and you can see we have this big touchscreen LCD infotainment system. This is one of the best touches inside this cabin. This is actually one of my favorite software packages, aside from the fact that you do have to control the headlights from this touchscreen. That's something that's been getting a lot of press. I honestly leave my headlights on auto all the time, so I don't think it's a huge deal. But I do love the fact that we have easy access to the camera views in the vehicle. Depending on the version of the GM product you're in, you'll have a bunch of different camera views. That's a really nice touch there. We also have basically full screen Apple CarPlay. The left side of the screen is reserved for system functions like the factory nav, which is another kind of cool touch because you can actually get that factory nav over here on the full screen LCD instrument cluster. That is a really cool touch. This is certainly one of my favorite LCD instrument cluster softwares. Kind of funny that it's in a mid-sized truck there. Up at the top, we have a full color heads-up display, also a nice touch you won't find in much of the competition. Going back down the center console, we have two big air vents there, the controls for the rear locker and the front locker. Obviously, you can't lock the front locker independently, it has to be locked with the rear. Then we have a Qi wireless charging mat, some USB inputs there, the mode selector for the four-wheel drive system, including 4Auto, another feature that I like. This is a full-time four-wheel drive system, although you can put it in 2 high for the best fuel economy. Pretty traditional console shifter right there. And then we have two decently sized cup holders here in the middle. They're not the largest. You couldn't fit some of those larger Nalgene bottles in there, but regular takeaway cups should be just fine. Center console's nice and padded. We get a reasonable amount of storage in there, but keep in mind it is a mid-sized truck. The steering wheel is one of GMC's newer designs, as is the turn signal stock right over there, pretty much the same as the one that we find in the Cadillac Lyriq. You'll find the controls for the cruise control over here, controls for that multifunction cluster over here on this side, and a heated steering wheel button. How about the back seat? Well, at the moment, it is definitely full of luggage, but clearly it's going to be a little bit smaller than in a full-size truck. If I squeak in next to my luggage, you can see that I have about an inch of legroom with the front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, and quite logically less headroom than we'd find in a Sierra 1500. Headroom is pretty reasonable for a mid-sized truck, although if I put my head back here to the headrest, the back of my head is touching the ceiling because it kind of curves down there around right by that rear window. They have made sort of a dish out of the ceiling for improved headroom, but it does tuck in on the sides, so if you're off-roading, your passengers are really going to want to hang on to the handle because otherwise your head could hit the side. Now, I do find the interior a little bit more roomy in the Gladiator, but I don't think it's quite as tech-focused as this. I really love that instrument cluster and the LCD infotainment system in the dashboard. On the downside, the roof doesn't come off. So we now have the AT4X AEV edition out on the trail. It seems like quite a mouthful there. But you know, they've made some notable improvements. For me, the extra suspension lift and the factory 35s are probably the biggest deal here.
Yeah, when you go to the AEV edition, you're going to get some goodies, and those tires are going to be a big piece of what's going to make this more capable for you. But as it becomes more capable, a little more protection is going to be requested and desired by most, and so you're going to get that as well.
Yeah, that's why we have those, you know, the tougher skid plates, the different bumpers, front and rear, etc. Big tires, obviously the big thing, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that 35s are coming from the factory. Clearly the truck was designed for that from the beginning, because in a solid axle vehicle, that's the only way you can improve ground clearance, really, is you add bigger tires, because you got to make the diameter bigger, so that way you can actually get more clearance over the differential. And as you can see, the trucks in front of us and behind us, there's really quite a lot of clearance there already. If you want to take things to the next level, you're probably really going to be taking a look at, you know, a Gladiator, because you can get some 37s relatively easily on there. But weird twist, for 2024, Jeep did not make as many changes actually to the Gladiator as I think a lot of us had expected. We don't, for instance, find a Gladiator with full float axles like you can get on a Wrangler.
Yeah, and I think some of it's going to be what's the market doing, and because the competition's heating up in the off-road mid-sized truck segment, and Gladiator came out really strongly, and so the fact that they are not quick to make additions, I think we'll see if that hurts sales at all or gives other opportunities for vehicles like the AT4X AEV edition. But we'll see throughout the year and what sales look like.
Yeah, and the new TRD Pro is coming up soon. Of course, from Toyota, we'll be driving that in November, so be sure and stay tuned for that video. But you know, the Canyon and of course the Colorado, which we really can't talk about this without talking about the Bison.
Yeah.
Two flavors, a very capable vehicle. There are some very minor differences, most of which customers are not really going to, you know, make too much over, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
Other than the styling. Do you like the styling of the Chevy? Do you like the styling of the GMC? I prefer the styling of the GMC. I always have. That applies to the Sierra as well as this Canyon. I also like the interior changes here a little bit more than we find in the Chevy. You know, the only real functional difference is the hydraulic jounce rebound bumper stops basically that you get in the Colorado standard, but you can get them optionally in the AT4 as well.
Yeah.
And it's not really a huge functional difference since you can get it from the factory if you want it. So we should talk about that premium thing, because that is, I would honestly say, one of the only things that I, you know, maybe grin a little bit when I hear with GMC is like, you know, we are the premium truck. Yes, the finishes in here are nicer on average than the Colorado, but they're not really a world away. And I would also say they're not really a world away from the competitive trucks. This is nicer inside than a Nissan Frontier. But you know, the new Tacoma in its limited trim has a pretty decent interior, pretty big screens, and the Gladiator has actually some more stitched components on the dash. I'm a little bit torn. For off-roading, if I want an off-road truck, I don't want stitched bits in the dash. I don't want a stitched leather dash because it's going to be hard to clean. They're going to get scratched up. They're going to get torn up. If I wanted a truck, I want hard plastics that are easy to clean. But if I expected a premium luxury truck, then I do want those things. And of course, here we find, you know, hard plastic upward sections of the door, hard plastic dashboard. And that does seem a little bit discordant with this premium labeling.
Yeah, I think it's tough. You know, you mentioned the Tacoma Limited, but with the Limited, you're going to be limited in how much off-road capability you can get along with it. And so when it comes to an offering like this, I think they're trying to limit the compromises made. So we can have some of those extra features. We can have all the cameras, but we can have the snazzy interior. We can have, again, just some of those upper end features that you're going to get in some of the rest of the segment.
For the price tag, though, they could have given us a slush molded dash.
It's a significant price tag.
Yeah,
you know, we have a heads up display. I would prefer the heads up display to improved dash, but it's going to be to each their own, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this dash here definitely is already showing a little bit of wear. You know, we only have a few miles on this truck already, but it's been, you know, put through the ringer a bit on some of these off-road trails. But I just do wish it had some of those upgraded materials that would just justify the marketing campaign. I think that's really what it is for me. If you're going to market it this way, then we should get interior upgrades that actually make it feel premium.
I think, you know, we spent some time yesterday in the Sierra, and I think that has a more premium feel.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if it's just sort of a limit on the segment. You know, how many mid-sized truck shoppers are looking for a really luxury experience, and what are they willing to pay when they can get more truck for the same money? So I wonder if we run into an overlap issue there.
And it is definitely some overlap because this truck is going to be about $70,000 probably. We don't know final pricing on the AEV yet, but my guess is we're probably going to be right around 70 with everything that this truck has on it, which does mean that, you know, an AT4, AT4X Silverado or Sierra is right in the price range as this.
Yeah, and I think that's where we run into some issues there is how many people are going to say no to the bigger, more capable in many ways vehicle. And I think when it comes to the mid-sized truck segment, when we get things like the Tacoma, well, the Tacoma is a much more popular off-roader than the Tundra, and it's because the trails like this will be much more difficult with a big vehicle. So
yeah, I would not want a Sierra AT4X necessarily on this trail, and I certainly wouldn't want a heavy-duty AT4X on this trail. It's 250 inches longer. I mean, it's like trying to drive a school bus down here. I don't think that's something I would want to do.
No, so I think we're hitting just about that limit of the consumer base that's looking for luxury, mid-size, and off-road significant off-road capability.
But we should talk about now about the on-road performance. So, you know, you didn't have the opportunity to drive the non-AEV AT4X yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But as far as on-road performance, there's not really a lot given up for the bigger diameter tires and the little bit of extra lift that we get here. It's already pretty high of a lift versus the regular Canyon. So, you know, you're definitely going to feel that it's going to be higher center of gravity. It's not going to be quite the Canyon Carver that the regular Canyon or Colorado would be. But I think they struck a decent balance, and that's definitely one of the advantages of getting an aftermarket package like AT4, AT4X, or AT4X AEV from GMC themselves, is that they're going to make sure that the driving dynamics aren't as compromised as they could be if you just tried to home cook your own off-road package.
Yeah, it's the whole package deal. You could, of course, take a standard Canyon or Colorado or, you know, any such option and put a bunch of aftermarket bits on it. They're not going to work as seamlessly. You're not going to be able to validate any of these things against the other competition. And so one of the first questions I asked is, how do the tires feel? Because 35s are big tires, and you don't really see them on vehicles like the Canyon. And you said it was well sorted and so far so good. And you're just not going to know that if you go to the shop and say, throw these on there.
Yeah, and of course, you know, the shop's never going to be able to throw in an electronic front locker, which is one of the big reasons to get the AT4X over the competition, is that we do have that true mechanical front locker rather than just a brake-based system, which is what we've generally found in a lot of Toyota's off-road vehicles. You know, for a logical reason, I would say on the flip side, there are certainly times where you don't want to have a front locker on, where you can actually lose traction and stability crawling across very select types of terrain. Like if you're on a granite surface, you're trying to crab around a corner, you don't really want the front locker on in that situation. A brake-based system could be better. But for mud, for really snowy, gravelly, rocky trails, etc., if you're really steep, you do want the actual mechanical front locker, and that's something that's missing in a reasonable number of ostensibly off-road vehicles. So at this point in the day, we've now spent about 2 hours on some pretty rough trails, but nothing that's overly technical, to be perfectly honest, that would really challenge this AEV. Definitely lots of skid plate bashing rocks like we just saw back there, but this is mainly a beautiful scenic trail that people can get further down because of the capability of the AEV, because we have the lockers all the way around. You'd be able to do this, you know, when it was a little bit slushy outside, when it was wet and slick and rainy outside. That would give you that extra confidence ability. But, you know, on some of these off-camber situations, you're still going to be traction limited, of course, by the tires. But, you know, I think that GMC did a really great job just giving us a solid off-road package from the factory.
Yeah, like you said, we've been doing this for a couple hours now, and it's handled everything that we've thrown at it. It's been relatively comfortable, and we have all the features that we want in this truck segment, as well as the capability to do everything in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can just hear that scraping down there, which was fine. That's on the rock rails. You know, the suspension tune, I think, is just about right as far as balance. It actually is pretty comfortable on the open highway. We were driving in some of the 75 and 80 mile an hour zones up here, and it had no problem keeping up and being relatively quiet for an all-terrain tire right from the factory and being a big boxy truck. And I think, you know, the ride quality is pretty good because they really need some stiffness to control the suspension motions as you're moving over some of these larger obstacles on this trail. And that lends well to highway travel, especially long distance highway travel. Fuel economy, you know, it's not going to be the absolute best in the pickup truck segment, of course, because of the all-terrain tires, etc. But you could logically expect about 20 miles per gallon on average. I am personally going to be intrigued to see if this is more fuel efficient than the new Tacoma, because fuel efficiency hasn't really been the forte of mid-sized trucks in America.
No, and I don't think it's been requested from the consumer. You know, they want more power out of the mid-size segment. I think the mid-size covers more these days than the full-size used to, and so there's a lot of that hybrid consumer kind of between the two. I love the suspension tuning on this. Like you said, I think if you go any softer, we start to compromise some of the on-road capability. And that's where trucks like this tend to spend a lot of time. So,
And fortunately today we have been able to spend time in both the AEV and the non-AEV version of the AT4X. Right now, this particular model is not the AEV. You can see we don't have the AEV embroidery on the headrests. And having gone up this trail, now we're going down the trail, I think you will notice the extra clearance. We were definitely scraping a bit less in the AEV versions. That's certainly one reason you want to get that over the model without the package. But this is still a very capable truck, and I admit to being a little bit torn about the right thing to do. We don't know the pricing on this package just yet, but the AEV package is nearly $7,000 on the half-ton Sierra 1500. So it's not going to be an inexpensive package here. We do get the addition of the extra bumper, the different bumper in the rear, but we already get the AEV bumper up front. You can already add a winch to that if you want. We don't get the extra expanded skid plate protection, but you know, we still get skid plates on the AT4. It's still pretty capable. I am just a little bit torn as to whether or not this is worth it. So we should probably talk about pricing now.
yeah, let's do it.
If you're looking to get your hands on the 2024 Canyon, the regular models should be on dealer lots pretty soon. The AEV edition, this is coming a little bit later this year. And rather unfortunately, GMC has not said how much it will set you back. But we do know that this very red model over here is going to start at $55,000. And we also know that in 2023, the Edition 1 model ended up at around $65,000. So I would not be surprised if the AEV version of the Canyon ended up being right around that $65,000 mark, because we do get a reasonable amount extra. We get the metal bumpers, front and rear. You'll really notice the difference in the front end design. We get the upgraded wheels, the upgraded tires, the upgraded skid plate package. We get a few interior tweaks. We get the bigger spare in the bed, and that does require that bed mount in the rear. That's one bummer that you might want to keep in mind. Interestingly enough, you'll notice as you look around this AT4X over here, we don't quite have as much of a recovery option in this vehicle. We do have the red hooks down here at the bottom, but we don't have the beefier bumper with the winch slot that you find in the AEV edition. And recovery from the rear is going to be a little bit easier because we get the integrated recovery hooks in the back, which we don't find on the regular AT4X model. Now, if you look closely at this bumper, you will notice something that I found a little interesting, and that is that we have this plastic section in the middle of the steel bumper. So steel up here, plastic in the middle, and then a plastic cover down at the bottom. That's because if we look at the Canyon over here, this regular AT4X, same sort of thing, metal bumper there, plastic over here, because this is where the sensors are for the blind spot monitoring system. GMC decided not to put them in the tail lamp modules. They wanted this cleaner look. They also wanted a slightly less expensive tail light module, but it does limit some of the possibilities a little bit when we take a look at the AT4X AEV edition, because this part has to stay there for that sensor. There is a skid plate underneath there. They said the sensor is well protected in the AEV bumper. It's been tucked up behind there a little bit, so a lot of work went into that. Now, as far as competition goes, obviously the Gladiator Rubicon is right in this segment. For 2023, it was a little bit less expensive. For 2024, depending on how you configure it, it's going to be about the same price as the AT4X as far as starting. Logically, the AEV edition of the Canyon is going to be a bit more expensive than the base Gladiator Rubicon, but they're also very different vehicles. If you want the better on-road truck, that's probably going to be the Canyon. If you want the better off-road truck, I would say there's some argument to be made in the case of the Gladiator. It is going to be a bit of a different experience as well, with the removable doors, the removable roof sections, the fold flat windshield, etc., but also the lack of an independent front suspension. The Gladiator is a little unusual in that it doesn't have one. It has a solid axle up front, and of course the GMC Canyon and every other truck really in North America, with only a few limited exceptions, have independent front suspension. And that's going to make a big difference in terms of daily driver livability. But if you really want the ultimate rock crawler, then it could be something like the Gladiator Rubicon, but it's not going to have as much power as the Canyon either. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comments section, and stay tuned because hopefully we'll have one of these at home as soon as possible, or perhaps one of these silver models as well, and hopefully by that point we might know how much it's going to cost. See all of you later. If you thought I was done talking, you're almost right, because I should give a quick plug, a quick shout out to our other videos coming up. You may have either seen the video on the Canyon AT4X, the HD AT4X, or the 1500 AT4X, or the entire pack of AT4Xs, as I might say. But if you haven't, be sure and check out our videos on the 2024 1500 AT4X with the new turbo. Of course, the first ever AT4X heavy duty over here if you want off-road capability and stout towing and hauling, or if you want something that's more affordable, easier to park, and honestly more nimble on trails, then you want to take a look at the Canyon AT4X. And with that out of the way, again, hit that subscribe button. Find us over on social media, Twitter, Facebook, X, Post, News, all those things that you're supposed to be following, and I will see all of you next week.